A daughter's bold decision. The autumn wind rattled the windows of the small brick house on West Division Street as Naomi Letcher placed the last bowl of chicken stew on the dinner table. The aroma of garlic and herbs filled the cramped dining room. The tension in the air was thicker than the steam rising from the bowls. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped them on her apron, preparing herself for what she needed to say.
Dad!
"I have something important to tell you," Naomi said quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the old refrigerator in the corner. Thomas Fletcher, a 56-year-old construction foreman with calloused hands and a stern face, looked up from his newspaper. His weathered features hardened as he noticed the nervous expression on his oldest daughter's face. "What is it now, Naomi?" Her mother, Rita, and younger sister, Grace, stopped their conversation and turned their attention to her. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second feeling like an eternity. "I got a job working nights," Naomi began, trying to keep her voice steady. "At the Blue Moon Bar downtown. It's just waitressing, but the pay is really good, and we need the money." The sound of the chair scraping against the linoleum floor made everyone jump. Thomas had stood up so quickly that his coffee cup tipped over, spilling dark liquid across the table. "A bar?" His voice rose with each word. "My daughter working in a bar with drunk men and troublemakers?" "Dad, it's not what you think," Naomi protested, grabbing napkins to soak up the spilled coffee. "It's a respectable place. I just serve drinks and clear tables. We're behind on rent, and Grace needs her medicine for her breathing problems. Don't you tell me what we need," Thomas shouted, his face turning red. "In this family, decent women don't work in places like that. What will our neighbors think? What will Pastor Anderson say when he finds out?" Rita stood up timidly, placing a gentle hand on her husband's arm. "Thomas, please calm down. Naomi is just trying to help the family. You stay out of this." He snapped at his wife. "This is your fault for letting her think she can make her own decisions without respecting this household." Naomi felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Dad, I'm 23 years old. I'm not a child anymore. And yes, I've already been working there for 3 weeks. The money I earned paid for Grace's inhaler and caught up our rent." The silence that followed was more frightening than the shouting. Thomas stared at his daughter with a mixture of fury and disappointment that cut deeper than any words could. 3 weeks, he repeated slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. 3 weeks of lying to my face and sneaking out at night like some kind of troublemaker." "I'm not a troublemaker," Naomi whispered, her voice breaking. "I just serve drinks and clean tables. I've never done anything wrong." "Wrong?" Thomas laughed bitterly. "Just being in that place ruins your reputation and this family's name. Do you think any decent man will want to marry you after knowing you work in a bar?" "I don't care what other men think," Naomi replied, feeling her desperation turn into defiance. "I'm not going to sit here and watch my family struggle when I can do something about it." The slap echoed through the house like a gunshot. Grace gasped, and Rita covered her mouth in shock. Naomi touched her burning cheek, unable to believe what had just happened. Her father had never hit her before. "Get out," Thomas said, his voice cold as ice. "If you want to live like you have no values, do it somewhere else, but not under my roof." "Thomas, you can't do this," Rita pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "She's your daughter." "My daughter died the day she decided to shame this family," he declared, turning toward his bedroom. "I want her gone before I get home from work tomorrow." Alone in the storm at midnight, Naomi walked through the wet streets of Chicago's West Side, carrying a worn suitcase and a backpack. The rain had gotten worse, soaking through her thin jacket and turning her sneakers into cold, soggy weights on her feet. The streetlights created blurry halos through the raindrops on her face. Mixing with tears she could no longer hold back. Her phone had buzzed 5 times. Grace was calling, but Naomi couldn't bring herself to answer. What would she say? That their father was right? That she had ruined everything by being proud and stubborn? The neighborhood where she grew up looked different now, as if she no longer belonged there. The lit windows of houses reminded her of everything she had lost. A home. A family. The safety of a place where she belonged. "Think, Naomi, think," she muttered to herself. Stopping under the awning of a closed drugstore, She could go to her best friend Monica's apartment. But Monica lived with her parents and Naomi didn't want to cause problems. Her Aunt Linda in Milwaukee was an option, but she didn't have money for a bus ticket. The women's shelter she knew about was always full. The thought of sleeping on the street terrified her. The sound of motorcycles approaching pulled her from her thoughts. A group of men on bikes had stopped at the corner, laughing loudly and drinking beer. One of them spotted her and said something to his friends, pointing in her direction. Naomi grabbed her suitcase tightly and started walking faster, her heart pounding like a drum. The whistles and crude comments followed her as she moved away, but she didn't dare look back. "Hey, pretty lady, need a ride somewhere?" one of them shouted. Naomi picked up her pace until she was almost running, her wet shoes slipping on the pavement. The men's laughter faded behind her, but fear had formed a knot in her stomach that wouldn't go away. She turned onto Michigan Avenue, where traffic was heavier even at this late hour. Cars rushed past, splashing water from puddles. Naomi took shelter at a bus stop, breathing hard and soaked to the bone. An elderly couple looked at her with pity from their car as they waited at the red light. Naomi looked away, feeling exposed and vulnerable. Was it so obvious that she had nowhere to go? The bus arrived half an hour later. She got on without a specific destination, paying with the few coins she had in her pocket. She sat in the back, hugging her backpack and trying to control her shivering. "Where am I going?" she asked herself quietly, seeing her ghostly reflection in the foggy window. The nighttime city passed before her eyes. Fast food restaurants with neon lights, groups of young people leaving clubs, night shift workers waiting for transportation. Everyone seemed to have a destination, a purpose, a place to arrive at. Everyone except her. An unexpected collision when the bus reached its last stop in the Gold Coast neighborhood. Naomi got off without protesting. The rain had decreased to a steady drizzle, but the cold had intensified. The streets in this wealthy area were better lit and cleaner, but also emptier. She walked aimlessly for hours, occasionally stopping in a doorway to rest. Her feet hurt terribly. She was hungry, and the reality of her situation was hitting her with full force. She was alone, completely alone. At 3 a.m, exhausted and drenched, she stopped at a particularly well-lit corner. In the distance, she could see the lights of a hospital. At least there would be security if she needed it. That's when she heard the roar of an engine approaching. A black sports car was speeding down the empty avenue. Naomi, distracted by her thoughts and blinded by tears, took a step toward the street just as the traffic light changed. The screech of tires against wet asphalt was the last thing she heard before everything went black. Cameron Wells pressed the gas pedal of his Aston Martin as he navigated the empty streets of the Gold Coast. The speedometer showed 55 miles per hour in a 30 miles per hour zone, but at 3 a.m, who would give him a ticket? Besides, he needed speed to calm the storm raging inside him. The board meeting had been a disaster. His majority partner, Derek Phillips, had questioned every decision he'd made in the last 6 months. The expansion of the Wells Hospitality hotel chain to Miami was in danger, and investors were starting to doubt. "Maybe you should take a vacation." "Cameron," Phillips had said, with that patronizing smile he hated so much, "you've been very intense lately." Tense? As if dedicating 16 hours a day to building a business empire was something bad. As if he didn't have the right to demand excellence from everyone around him. Cameron shifted gears roughly, the roar of the engine temporarily drowning out his thoughts. His phone had rung 6 times during the drive. 3 calls from Nicole, his ex-girlfriend, who insisted on talking. 1 from his personal assistant reminding him of the 8 o'clock meeting, and 2 from his mother in London, probably to scold him for not attending the charity gala at the country club at 31 years old. Cameron Wells had everything. A fortune worth millions, properties in 4 cities, a physique he maintained with daily workouts, and the sharp business mind he'd inherited from his father. But that night, driving alone through the wet streets of the city he had conquered professionally, he felt emptier than ever. The rain started coming down harder again, drops hitting the windshield furiously. Cameron lit a cigarette and lowered the window slightly, letting the cold air bite his face. The smoke swirled and escaped into the night. Like all the dreams he had sacrificed for success, he was so lost in his thoughts that he almost didn't see the figure stumbling on the sidewalk. A young woman carrying a soaked suitcase, looking lost. For a second, he thought about stopping. There was something about her posture, a vulnerability that reminded him of someone from his past. But no. Cameron Wells didn't stop to pick up strangers on the street. He had worked too hard to risk his safety on a sentimental impulse. He accelerated slightly, determined to continue on his way. When the traffic light turned green, he floored it. The engine roared. The tires gripped the wet asphalt, and Cameron headed toward the intersection at an unsafe speed. He didn't see her until it was too late. The thin figure suddenly appeared in his field of vision, moving toward the street as if in a trance. Cameron shouted something incomprehensible as he slammed on the brakes with all his strength, feeling the abs fight against the wet road. The Aston Martin slid several yards before stopping, the tires screeching in a symphony of rubber and terror. The silence that followed was deafening. Cameron got out of the car with shaking legs, his heart beating so hard he could hear it over the sound of the rain. Adrenaline rushing through his veins gave everything a surreal feeling. The young woman was on the ground a few yards from the car, motionless. Her suitcase had burst open when it fell, scattering wet clothes across the asphalt. A white blouse floated in a puddle like a wilted flower. Oh, God, Cameron muttered, running to her and kneeling beside her. Are you okay? Can you hear me? Naomi slowly opened her eyes, blinking to focus her vision. The first face she saw belonged to a man with fine features, concerned green eyes, and slightly damp dark hair. For a confused moment, she thought she was dreaming. What happened? She murmured, trying to sit up. Don't move, Cameron said firmly, though his voice trembled. I almost hit you with my car. I'm going to call an ambulance. No. Naomi managed to sit up, ignoring the sharp pain in her left knee. I don't need an ambulance. I don't have insurance. Cameron studied her carefully. She had scrapes on her hands and knee, and her clothes were soaked and dirty. But she didn't appear to have serious injuries. However, something in her eyes caught his attention. It wasn't just physical pain he saw there. What's your name? He asked gently. Naomi, she answered, feeling strangely calmed by his voice. Naomi Fletcher. Naomi, I'm Cameron. Listen to me. Even if you don't think you need a doctor, I insist on taking you to the hospital. It was my fault. I was going too fast. It wasn't your fault. Naomi looked at the traffic light. You had the green light. I shouldn't have stepped into the street without looking. Cameron took off his expensive coat and put it over her shoulders. The gesture was so natural, so protective, that Naomi felt like crying again. What were you doing walking alone at this hour? He asked as he helped her stand up. The simple question was like opening a floodgate. Naomi felt all the repressed emotions of the last hours threatening to overflow. I have nowhere to go, she admitted in a whisper, barely audible over the rain. Cameron frowned. There was something about the way she said it, a raw honesty that hit him unexpectedly. For years, he had been surrounded by people who always wanted something from him, money, connections, favors. But this young woman, soaked and hurt in the middle of the night, wasn't pretending or manipulating. Your family? He asked, though something in her expression told him he had touched a painful subject. Naomi shook her head, unable to speak without breaking down completely. Cameron looked around. The street was deserted, the rain kept falling, and this young woman obviously needed help. His business mind started evaluating options. He could give her money for a hotel, call social services, or simply take her to the hospital and let her figure things out on her own. But as he picked up the scattered clothes and put them back in the broken suitcase, a voice inside him screamed that he couldn't just abandon her. Not after almost hitting her, not when it was clear she was in a desperate situation. Look, Naomi, he said, closing the suitcase as best he could. It's obvious we've both had a difficult night. I'll make you a deal. Let me take you to see a doctor. And afterward, well, we can think about options. Naomi looked at him with a mixture of surprise and distrust. In the last few hours, she had learned that she couldn't trust anyone, not even her own family. Why would he do this? He didn't know her. Why would you do that? She asked. You don't know me. Cameron was quiet for a moment, wondering the same thing. Why was he offering help to a complete stranger? He, who never got involved in other people's problems, who had built walls around his personal life higher than his hotels. Because I hurt you, he said finally. And because nobody should be alone on a night like this. The words came out before he could censor them. Naomi looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of lies or bad intentions. But what she saw was unexpected, a loneliness as deep as her own. Okay, she whispered. But just to see the doctor. Cameron nodded and helped her walk to the Aston Martin. As he opened the passenger door, he wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his life, or if, for the first time in years, he was doing something truly important. Neither of them knew that this rainy night had just changed the course of their lives forever. A new morning in an unfamiliar place, Naomi woke up, disoriented. Her mind struggling to piece together where she was. The bed beneath her was incredibly soft, the sheets smooth as silk, and golden sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows she didn't recognize. For a brief moment, she thought it had all been a dream until the sharp pain in her knee reminded her. Otherwise, she sat up slowly and looked around. The room was larger than her entire family's living room back home. Decorated in calming shades of cream and beige with modern furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. She had her own bathroom with a rainfall shower that seemed straight out of a luxury spa, a desk by the window, and a closet that could hold 10 times her wardrobe. On the nightstand sat a handwritten note in firm, masculine script. Naomi, it's 7:30 a.m. I went for my morning run and have a meeting at 9 o'clock. Your first official day starts tomorrow. So rest today. There's coffee in the kitchen and food in the refrigerator. I'll be back at 1 p.m. to show you the office. Cameron, below the note was a debit card and a piece of paper with a PIN number. For emergencies and personal expenses, daily limit, $100. Naomi stared at the card as if it were an alien object. $100 a day was more than her family spent in a week. She showered with abundant hot water for the first time in months, feeling the tension melt from her muscles. When she emerged, she found a set of new clothes laid out on the bed, black dress pants, an elegant but simple white blouse, and comfortable but professional-looking flats. Everything was exactly her size. How had he known? Meeting the household staff at the kitchen took her breath away. It was 3 times the size of her family's kitchen, with a marble island in the center, stainless steel appliances that gleamed like mirrors, and a bay window overlooking a garden that looked like something from a design magazine. Helen Moreno, a woman in her late 50s, wearing a floral apron and a warm smile, was preparing something that smelled delicious. Good morning, dear, she said with a slight accent that hinted at her roots in Texas. I'm Helen, the cook and housekeeper. Mr. Wells told me you'd be joining us to work. Good morning, Naomi, replied shyly. I'm Naomi. I didn't know there were other people working here. Of course, honey. There's Robert, the gardener, who comes 3 times a week. It's Linda, who comes to clean on Tuesdays and Fridays, and me from Monday through Saturday. Helen poured her a steaming cup of coffee. Are you hungry? I'm making blueberry pancakes. The aroma transported Naomi immediately to Sunday mornings when her mother used to make pancakes after church. They smell amazing, but I don't want to be any trouble. Nonsense, Helen interrupted. Mr. Wells specifically asked me to take good care of you. He said you'd had some difficult days. As Naomi ate the best pancakes she'd tasted in years, Helen told her about the house and about Cameron. He's a good boss, though very serious. Works too much, that poor man. Almost never home, always traveling or in meetings. Her eyes grew sad. Since his father passed away, I haven't seen him bring friends over or do anything just for fun. How long have you worked here? Naomi asked. I watched him grow from a young man who inherited a hotel into a full-fledged businessman. But I also watched him close himself off more and more. Helen studied her with curiosity. Where are you from, dear? Naomi shared an abbreviated version of her story. Helen listened attentively, nodding understandingly and making small sounds of disapproval when she got to the part about her father. Men can be very stubborn with their old-fashioned ideas, she said finally. but time heals many wounds. You'll see that your father will come around eventually. First day at Wells Hospitality at 1 o'clock sharp. Cameron returned wearing an impeccable gray suit that probably cost more than 6 months of Naomi's former salary. But he looked tired, with dark circles more pronounced than the night before. "How are you feeling?" he asked, noticing she was barely limping anymore. "Much better. The clothes are perfect, but how did you know my size?" "I asked Helen to estimate. She has a good eye for these things." He poured himself coffee. "Ready to see your new workplace?" The Wells Hospitality corporate building rose like a tower of glass and steel in the loop, reflecting the afternoon clouds on its 40 floors. In the lobby, a gold sign announced Wells Hospitality, redefining American excellence. "Impressive," Naomi murmured, feeling like she didn't belong in this world of polished marble and executives in expensive suits. "The main office is on the 35th floor," Cameron explained as they waited for the elevator. "You'll have your own desk connected to mine with access to my calendar and communication systems." In the elevator, Naomi noticed how employees greeted Cameron with a mixture of respect and nervousness. It was clear he inspired both admiration and a bit of fear. Mr. Wells, a blonde woman in her mid-30s, intercepted them, dressed impeccably with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Jessica Park from Human Resources. I understand we have a new team member." The way she said team member made Naomi feel like she was being examined under a microscope. "Jessica. Meet Naomi Fletcher, my new personal assistant," Cameron said in a neutral tone. "I need you to prepare her contract and documentation." "Of course. Could I review her resume and references first?" Jessica asked with forced politeness. "That won't be necessary. I take full responsibility for her hiring." Jessica blinked, clearly surprised. At Wells Hospitality, everyone went through an exhaustive selection process. "I understand salary. $50,000 annually, plus full benefits package." This time Jessica couldn't hide her shock. It was a high salary for someone with no apparent experience in the corporate sector. "Very well. I'll have everything ready by tomorrow morning." Understanding the role when they reached Cameron's office, Naomi felt intimidated. It was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of the city. The main desk was a work of art in dark wood, surrounded by leather chairs and a conference table that could seat 20 people. "Your desk is there." He pointed to an elegant piece of furniture by the window. "From there, you can see who enters my office and handle all calls." Naomi approached her new workspace. It had a state-of-the-art computer, 3 different phones, and a view that left her breathless. "What exactly do you need me to do?" she asked, feeling the weight of responsibility. Cameron sat at his desk and opened a leather agenda. "First, you manage my calendar. I have meetings constantly, business trips, lunches with investors. I need you to coordinate everything and keep me updated." He pulled out a detailed list. "Second, you filter my calls. I receive about 60 calls daily. Only about 12 are truly important." "How do I know which ones are important?" Naomi asked, already feeling overwhelmed. "I'll give you a list of priority contacts. For the rest, take messages." Cameron spent the next 2 hours explaining systems, access codes, and basic protocols. Naomi took notes furiously, trying to absorb information that seemed overwhelming. "Questions?" he said finally. Many," Naomi admitted, "but I guess I'll figure them out as I go." "Is there anything else?" Cameron looked at her seriously. "In 3 days, I have a business dinner with Japanese investors. I need you to come with me to take notes and coordinate follow-ups." "A formal dinner?" Naomi's stomach tightened. "I don't know if I have appropriate clothes for that. We'll take care of that tomorrow, but," Naomi, his voice softened, "these dinners are important. The Japanese value protocol and attention to detail greatly." "What if I mess up?" The question came out more vulnerable than she intended. Cameron was quiet for a moment, studying her worried face. "You know what I've learned in 9 years running this company? People can teach you protocols, manners, and procedures, but they can't teach you honesty, hard work, or loyalty." He leaned forward. "You have the latter. The former you can learn." It was the first time he had offered words of encouragement, and Naomi felt a strange warmth in her chest. "Thank you for believing in me." "I'm not doing you a favor," he replied, returning to his professional tone. "I'm giving you an opportunity. What you do with it depends entirely on you, preparing for success the next morning." Naomi found herself at Nordstrom on Michigan Avenue with Beverly Sanders, an image consultant Cameron had hired to prepare her. The navy blue dress she'd chosen with Beverly's help was elegant but conservative, with three-quarter sleeves and a cut that made her look professional without losing femininity. "You look perfect," Beverly said, examining her reflection. The Japanese appreciate subtlety and respect for traditions. Naomi nodded nervously as Beverly explained the protocol for the 10th time: how to give and receive business cards with both hands, the importance of slight bows, and how to take notes discreetly without interrupting conversations. "Remember, you're not just an employee tonight," Cameron had told her that morning. "You're a representation of the company. The Tanakas have been considering investing in our Asian expansion for 8 months. This dinner could seal a $70 million deal." The pressure was suffocating. At 7 that evening, Cameron picked her up. He wore an impeccable black suit with a blue tie that made his green eyes even more striking. When he saw her, he stopped abruptly. "You look very professional," he said, and Naomi detected something more in his voice, though she couldn't identify what. "Is very professional good or bad?" she asked nervously. "It's perfect for tonight." The restaurant Alinea was one of Chicago's most exclusive. Naomi had never been to a place where servers wore white gloves and each dish was a work of art. She felt like an imposter among the diners, who clearly belonged to this world. The Tanakas arrived promptly at 8. Hiroshi Tanaka was a man in his early 60s, impeccably dressed, accompanied by his son Kenji, approximately Cameron's age, and 2 assistants. Tanaka-san, Cameron greeted with a perfect bow. "It's an honor to receive you in Chicago, son." "The honor is ours," Hiroshi responded in careful English. Naomi followed the protocol exactly as she'd been taught, presenting her business card with both hands and making a respectful bow. She noticed how Hiroshi evaluated every detail of her behavior, a test of character. During the first hour, Naomi took notes discreetly while the men discussed investment terms, hotel expansion, and Asian markets. Her years waiting tables had taught her to be almost invisible when necessary. That's when Jessica Park arrived. "Cameron, what a surprise to find you here," she said with a dazzling smile. Approaching the table uninvited, Naomi saw Cameron's jaw tighten slightly. "Jessica, I'm in a business meeting, of course." Jessica looked at the Japanese visitors with professional interest. "I didn't know we had potential investors from Asia." It was a clear protocol violation. Information about investors was confidential, and Jessica had no right to be there. But Cameron couldn't be rude in front of the Tanakas without looking bad. "May I introduce Jessica Park from our Human Resources Department?" Jessica introduced herself to the Japanese investors, but Naomi noticed her protocol was imperfect. She didn't make the appropriate bow and handed over her card with only one hand. "And you are?" Jessica asked Naomi with a condescending smile. "Naomi Fletcher, Mr. Wells' personal assistant," she responded politely. "Ah, the new hire." Jessica turned to Hiroshi. "Excuse my curiosity, but is it common in Japan for assistants to participate in meetings of this level?" The question was clearly malicious. Naomi felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she maintained her composure. Hiroshi studied Jessica for a moment before responding. "In Japan, we greatly value the loyalty and dedication of all team members," he said diplomatically. "A competent assistant is invaluable to any successful executive." "Of course," Jessica murmured. "Well, I'll let you continue with your meeting." When she left, the atmosphere at the table had changed. Kenji exchanged a look with his father that Naomi couldn't interpret. "Please excuse the interruption," Cameron said, clearly annoyed. "Don't worry." "Well, son," Hiroshi responded, "but I wonder, is it common for your confidential information to be accessible to different departments?" It was a diplomatic but lethal question. He was questioning the company's information security. Naomi saw Cameron struggle to find an answer that wouldn't compromise the deal. That's when she remembered something Helen had told her about building trust. "Tanaka-san," she said softly, addressing Hiroshi directly. "In America, We have a saying, the cobbler's children have no shoes. It means that sometimes the most valuable things aren't the most visible. Roshi looked at her with renewed interest. Please explain, Fletcher-san. Ms. Park didn't have access to information about you because she doesn't need it for her work. She came here by coincidence. Naomi kept her voice calm and respectful. In Mr. Wells' company, confidential information is shared only with those who need to know it, like me. Who takes these notes to make sure no detail of our conversations is lost? Kenji smiled slightly and said something to his father in Japanese. Hiroshi nodded. I understand and appreciate your honesty, Fletcher-san. It's a quality highly valued in business. The rest of the dinner passed without incident. When dessert time came, Hiroshi addressed Cameron directly. We've been evaluating several investment opportunities in North America. But after tonight, I believe Wells Hospitality has something other companies don't. What is that, Tanaka-san? Integrity and a team that reflects it at all levels. He looked meaningfully at Naomi. We're ready to proceed with the investment. The aftermath of success, the drive back to Cameron's home, was silent. But it was a different silence than those first days. Naomi watched the city lights pass by the window, still processing what she had accomplished that evening. The Chicago skyline glittered against the dark sky, and for the first time since leaving her family's house, she felt something resembling hope. Do you know you just saved a $70 million deal? Cameron finally said, breaking the quiet. I just told the truth, Naomi replied, still looking out the window. Exactly. It. Cameron glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. Jessica almost ruined 6 months of negotiations, and you saved it with honesty and cultural respect. When they arrived at the mansion, Cameron didn't head immediately inside. Instead, he walked toward the back garden where a small fountain created a relaxing sound under the moonlight. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves. Is everything okay? Naomi asked, following him outside. Better than okay. Sat on the edge of the fountain, loosening his tie. Do you know how long I've been looking for investors willing to help us expand into Asia? 2 years. 2 years of presentations, negotiations, and compromises. He looked up at the stars barely visible through the city's light pollution. My father built our first hotel with his own hands. He worked 18-hour days until a heart attack took him when he was 54. I was only 23 when I inherited everything. Naomi sat beside him, sensing he needed to talk more than she needed to listen. That must have been terrifying. Terrifying doesn't begin to describe it. I had business degree, but no real experience. Everyone expected me to fail, to sell the hotel, and live off the money. Cameron's voice grew distant. But I couldn't let his legacy die. So I worked harder than him, proved I could be just as ruthless. Just as dedicated, and you succeeded, Naomi said softly. I built an empire, he corrected. But somewhere along the way I forgot why I was building it. I forgot that business is about people, not just profits. He turned to look at her directly. Then I almost hit you with my car, and for the first time in years, I felt like a human being instead of a machine. The vulnerability in his voice surprised Naomi. This was a side of Cameron Wells the business world never saw. Why did you really offer me this job? She asked. And please don't say it's just because you felt guilty. Cameron was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. Because when I looked at you that night, soaked and desperate, I saw something I'd lost years ago. Authenticity. You weren't trying to impress me or manipulate me. You were just surviving, being honest about your situation. He stood up and walked to the fountain's edge. Everyone around me wants something. Money, connections, opportunities. But you just needed help, and you weren't afraid to admit it. I'm still afraid, Naomi confessed. Afraid I'll mess this up, that I'll disappoint you, that this is all too good to be true. Good, Cameron said with a slight smile. Fear keeps us sharp. Just don't let it paralyze you. Call from the past that night. Alone in her beautiful room, Naomi finally worked up the courage to check her phone. 15 missed calls from Grace, 8 from her mother, and surprisingly, 2 from a number she didn't recognize. She called Grace first. Her sister answered on the first ring. Naomi. Oh my God, where are you? Are you okay? Mom and I have been so worried. Grace's voice was thick with tears. I'm okay, Grace. I'm safe. I have a place to stay and a new job. Dad's been impossible, Grace said quietly. He won't talk about you. He acts like you never existed. But Mom cries every night, and I heard her arguing with him yesterday. Naomi's heart ached. How's your breathing? Do you have enough medicine? I'm fine. Naomi, don't worry about us. Where are you staying? Can I see you? Not yet, Naomi said, tears streaming down her face. I need to get settled first. But Grace, I need you to know something. What I did working at that bar, it wasn't shameful. I was trying to help our family. No, Grace whispered. I tried to tell Dad that, but he won't listen. He's so stubborn. After they hung up, Naomi sat in the darkness of her room, processing everything. She had a new life now, opportunities she'd never dreamed of, but the hole where her family used to be still hurt, building. I trust and understanding the next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Naomi threw herself into her work with determination that impressed even Cameron. She learned his schedule, anticipated his needs, and handled difficult clients with grace she didn't know she possessed. Helen became like a second mother, teaching her not just about the household, but about navigating the world of the wealthy. These people aren't better than you, Helen would say. They just had different opportunities. You hold your head high. Robert, the gardener, was a quiet man in his 70s who taught her about patience. Plants grow at their own pace, he told her one afternoon as she watched him prune roses. You can't force them. Same with life. But it was Cameron who challenged her the most. He was demanding, sometimes frustratingly so, but he was also fair. When she made mistakes, he corrected her without humiliating her. When she succeeded, he acknowledged it, though sparingly. You're learning fast, he said one afternoon after she'd successfully rescheduled a complicated series of meetings. Faster than my last 3 assistants combined. Maybe because I have more to prove, Naomi replied. Filing documents with practiced efficiency, Cameron looked up from his computer. What do you mean? You took a chance on someone with no experience, no connections, and no safety net. I can't afford to fail. Is that the only reason? He asked, his green eyes studying her intently. Naomi paused, considering. No, I also genuinely want to do well. This company, what you're building, it matters. You're creating jobs, providing experiences, making a difference. Something shifted in Cameron's expression. Most people just see the money and prestige. Most people don't start from where I started, Naomi countered, confronting the past, 6 weeks after she began working for Cameron. Naomi finally agreed to meet her mother and Grace at a small cafe far from her old neighborhood. Her hands shook as she waited, wondering if she was ready for this. Rita Fletcher looked like she'd aged 10 years. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she'd lost weight. Grace rushed forward and hugged Naomi tightly. You look amazing, Grace said, taking in Naomi's professional clothes and confident bearing. Like a completely different person. I'm still me, Naomi said, hugging her mother, who had started crying quietly. I'm so sorry, Rita whispered. I should have stood up to your father. I should have protected you. Mom, it's not your fault. Dad made his choice. Naomi held her mother's hands across the table. How is he? Rita's face hardened. Stubborn as ever. But he's been quieter lately. I think he regrets it, but he's too proud to admit it. Tell me everything, Grace insisted. Where are you living? What's your job really like? Naomi shared edited versions of her story, leaving out the part about the Nair accident and Cameron's initial rescue. She told them about the job, the responsibilities, and how she was learning every day. Your boss sounds very generous, Rita said carefully. Is he treating you well? Naomi understood the concern behind the question. He's professional, Mom. Demanding but fair. He gave me an opportunity when no one else would. As they talked, Naomi realized how much she'd changed. She stood taller, spoke with more confidence, and had a sense of purpose she'd never felt before. She wasn't the scared girl who'd been kicked out anymore. A new challenge 2 months into her job. Cameron called Naomi into his office with unusual urgency. Derek Phillips sat in one of the leather chairs, looking smug. Naomi. Derek here has raised some concerns about your qualifications, Cameron said, his voice tight with controlled anger. No offense to Ms. Fletcher, Derek said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, but as a major stakeholder, I have to question why we're paying top dollar for someone with no college degree and whose previous job was serving drinks. Naomi felt her face flush, but she kept her composure. None taken, Mr. Phillips. You're right to question it. Cameron's eyebrows rose slightly. This wasn't the response he'd expected. I don't have a fancy education or an impressive resume, Naomi continued, standing straighter. What I have is dedication, the ability to learn quickly, and loyalty. In 2 months, I've reorganized Mr. Wells' entire filing system, improved his meeting efficiency by 30%, and helped secure a $70 million investment from the Tanaka Group. She pulled out a folder. I also took the initiative to research our competition. Here's a comparative analysis of our services versus theirs, with suggestions for improvement. I did this on my own time, because I care about this company's success. Derek took the folder, his smug expression faltering as he flipped through the detailed report. Education is valuable, Naomi said quietly, but so is hunger. I'm hungry to prove myself, hungry to learn, hungry to succeed. That's something you can't get from a diploma. The room was silent for a moment. Then Derek closed the folder and stood up. Well, said Miss Fletcher, I apologize for underestimating you. He looked at Cameron. You chose well. After Derek left, Cameron leaned back in his chair, a rare smile playing at his lips. Where did that come from?